Well, gee, St. Patrick's Day dinner, the Knights of Columbus. Boy, that's a great organization. I was there just recently, and I met some friends. One was Dick Fatino. He said he saw my Why I Do What I Do show and said it brought tears to his eyes. In fact, when I did it, same here. The older you get, the more you appreciate your parents, but then it's kind of too late to talk to them. Anyway, the other person was Lenny Hoyt. Lenny Hoyt, who is the brother-in-law of Sally Hoyt. In any case, he thanks me for what I've been doing, and he related a story of a person, a young couple, and they had a rosary bead on their rearview window in their car. It was rather touching to him, and he said to them that it was really courageous for them to do that. And at the same time, you can get a Choose Life license plate on the rear of your car, like I do. The other person, just last Saturday, I met Mr. Barry again. He's a regular watcher, and it was interesting to hear what he had to say. He obviously listens very carefully because he asked me some questions. And he said it takes courage, and I agree. But most of the people in my age bracket do appreciate what I'm doing. The last thing was about this caller who called in and said that this program was outrageous. And I said last week that she was really, I thought I heard it was outrageously good. Well, it wasn't. She really, and at the same time, she really didn't say it was outrageously bad. So it's rather neutral. It was outrageous. Hi, do you know who I am, I guess? Is that what Patches Kennedy said? Don't you know who I am? It's quite an interesting story about him on his way into a plane, camera and all that, showing him really doing some things that normally most people do not do. Well, anyway, unfortunately he has a serious drug problem, and hopefully he will get over it. Hi, I'm Johnny Straight Talk. I'm really broadcasting live from the studios of RCTV in Reading, Massachusetts, USA. This is a call-in talk show program. You can call in at the phone number that's at the bottom of your screen. And it's a live program right now. After tonight, you will be able to see it reruns on Channel 9 or Channel 10. Just go to the town website and look for RCTV Studios, and it will be there. The way the state and federal government should be, according to my way, it'll cost you less. Now, if they had listened to what I really believe and my conservative viewpoints, I've been at this program for 3 years, and now you can't say that it wasn't the right way to go, because we've had people in government take advantage of us taxpayers, and we're paying dearly. It wasn't enough to have the savings and loan crisis about 20 years ago. But I do remember that, and they just simply repeated it, but even more seriously. There's an old Chinese proverb, give a man a fish and you fed him for the day. If you teach a man how to fish, you fed him for a lifetime. Unfortunately, the Democratic Party believes in entitlement programs. That's how they have their votes. And it's rather sad. Now, I was a Democrat. I was actually a liberal Democrat. You can't beat that, but I've changed. And I'm just telling the truth about where people ought to look for solutions, and it's not with the Democratic Party. And I don't belong to the Republican Party either. I belong to the Constitutional Party, and I had a program a couple of weeks ago about that. Premise of this program tonight is religion over the centuries has allowed government, local, state, and federal to replace more and more of religion's responsibilities. In turn, it has caused a significant decline in the Christian community that we all experience if you go to church services and things like that, places like that. This is a two-part program. The first part will be, what was Jesus saying about the community, or what should be done, or the government, or the state? So this will be about what we know from our own biblical resources. The second will be comparing what we are experiencing today, and then giving you examples of where we've strayed. You're welcome to call in, take part, challenge me. I'm always ready for a discussion at any time. Okay, so what did Jesus say about whether it's local, state, or federal government? I got a passage here I'll read. This is from the New Revised Standard Version, and here's the passage. Tell us, then, what do you think? Is it lawful to pay taxes to the emperor or not? This was a question posed by the Pharisees. The Pharisees were really the protagonists of the day against Jesus. They were testing him routinely because they didn't want to share power. They didn't want to think that Jesus, who didn't come in with royal gowns and all of the power to destroy the Jews' enemies, would be the way he is. He came in as a humble person. In any case, the rest of the passage is this. But Jesus, aware of their malice, said, "Why are you putting me to the test, you hypocrites?" And we always talk about loving Jesus, but Jesus did not refrain from calling a spade a spade. And we should never forget that, because Jesus is not either liberal or conservative. He was a radical by all standards, any standard you want to use. So, in this case here, he calls them directly to the face, "You're hypocrites." Of course, we got to be politically correct. We'd never do that to anybody, regardless who they are. But here's an example right here. And he says, "Show me the coin used for the tax." They brought him a denarius. Then he said to them, "Whose head is this, and whose title?" They answered, "The emperor's." Then he said to them, give therefore to the emperor the things that are the emperor's, and to God the things that are God's." Well, this caused a real problem, and it's a brilliant statement. So this is the only statement that I know of, from my understanding and reading, of Jesus talking about the government, and that's what he's doing. He says, give to the emperor what's due. In this case, it's a tax, so you have to pay a tax. Now, this is unusual because we know the Roman tax collection procedure was corrupt, badly corrupt. They were being overcharged and all this, but Jesus does not comment about that whatsoever. So he says clearly, give therefore to the emperor the things that are the emperor's. So we have to pay taxes, obviously, is the least you can understand from that statement. And to God, the things that are God. Well, when they heard this, they were amazed, and they left him and went away. Obviously, they were rather surprised and could not come back with an answer. They thought they had him trapped. So what do? Well, we have a clear signal what Jesus is talking about. You have to pay taxes at the minimum. But he doesn't say anything about all these other things that we have about today. Of course, they did not have anything like that. And what Jesus expects, or God expects, is what he wrote in the book, the good book. That's the only really written testimony we have about Jesus. Now, community is mentioned in Acts. It's another book of the Bible, and other books. But it isn't explicitly stated, but it's mostly implied. What I'll do now is read a couple other verses about this. That was Matthew 22nd, verses 17 to 22. Now this is another verse, and this is from Acts 11, verses 27 to 30. At the time, prophets came down from Jerusalem to Antioch. One of them, the named Agabus, stood up and predicted by the Spirit that there would be a severe famine over all the world, and this took place during the reign of Claudius. The disciples determined that according to their ability, each would send relief to the believers living in Judea. which would be mostly affected. This they did, sending it to the elders by Barnabas and Saul. So here's a case in point where the community of Jews or Christians, they felt obligated to give to whatever amount they could, truly sharing what they had. A real charitable action by the disciples. And this was, and it says in a footnote, Luke, who was the author of this, Luke was a physician at that time and wrote one of the Gospels, according to St. Luke. Luke is interested rather, and I quote, again, Luke is interested, and this is from the New American Bible. The verse is from the New NIV and SRV, and this is from the New American Bible, NAB. Luke is interested, unfortunately not footnotes in the other book, NSRV, I'm not sure why, but I haven't been able to figure that out. In any case, Luke is interested rather in showing the charity of the Antiochian community toward the Jewish Christians of Jerusalem, despite their differences on mixed communities. So that's the generosity. They didn't care whether they were just simply of that particular sect or whatever it was. Generosity. Here's another case of individuals, a community, making a decision. A third verse would be this one here, and this is from Acts chapter 4, 32nd to 37th verse. Now the whole group of those who believed were of one heart and soul, and no one claimed private ownership of any possessions, but everything they owned was held in common. With great power the apostles gave their testimony to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus, and great grace was upon them all. There was not a needy person among them, for as many as owned lands or houses sold them and brought the proceeds of what was sold. Now, that's an extraordinary event. How many of us would do that? There was a Levite, a native of Cyprus, Joseph, to whom the apostles gave the name Barnabas, which means son of encouragement. He sold a field that belonged to him, then brought the money and laid it at the apostles' feet. This is a second summary, I'll read the footnote. It emphasizes a system of distribution of goods and introduces Barnabas, who appears later in Acts as a friend and a companion of Paul, who, as noted here, endeared himself to the community by donation of money through the sale of property. This sharing of material possessions continues a practice that Luke describes during the historical ministry of Jesus. So here's one example of Jesus' reaction to the government, and you got two examples here of how the community worked to help their own kind, and even those who maybe possibly were apostates who left the church but were very sympathetic to some of the things that they were doing. So this is what we know. There are some other examples of the disciples helping each other out, but this is the most we have here, or at least samples of what biblical teachings are in terms of charity or how Christians work in a community. Essentially, there were no benefits during the Roman times. Maybe water was supplied. I mean, let's face it, that was very important to keep communities going. So they probably had water which was distributed. Who knows? They had no meters, so probably use all the water you want. Toilets were holes in the ground. It's really practiced today. If you look at some of the Indian tribes, African tribes, they do that. So those are the kinds of amenities. St. Luke, who was a doctor, he was part of the community. So we had a doctor. Just imagine what a doctor knew at that time, far less than what we have here today. The major thing here is that not only were there doctors, one doctor, you had probably bakers, you had people who had tradesmen who helped with the community, and they were all available within that community because there were probably some distance between communities. So the interdependence is a key word here. They worked together, They died together, they fought together, they loved each other, and they were very charitable to each other. But it was a very hard-scrabble kind of existence with no luxuries. I mean, a luxury to them probably was maybe having a rolling pin, you know, one of those probably made of ceramic or stone most likely, or some artisan tools. These were extremely important, and in their standard, they probably were luxuries to have because it was so difficult to make them. Everyone participated within the community, worked together, and even the least of them who weren't able to contribute were taken care of, disabled otherwise. I can't imagine there were any freeloaders at that time, as we have today. The more money we have, we give away, we encourage more of that. Not to say there aren't disabled people. There are other people who have difficulty, and I have a son who has that kind of difficulty. And it changes your whole life. But yet, it hasn't changed the basic principles I have, that we're still responsible for him, and we try to get the best care for him. Well, we'll be fast-forwarding to the modern day and what we have. The modern day is a far cry, and this is kind of like an introduction to the next program. It's a far cry from Jesus' time. And it also has contributed greatly to the decline of the Christian community. A church. I belong to a church, a community in a church. We're declining in numbers. I'm a Catholic, but we're not the only ones. It's really the Northeast and probably the western part of the United States have declining numbers, while guess what? The South, the Southwest, they're growing in numbers. Of course, if you go out to the edges of other kinds of countries, China, which is a fertile ground for conversion, and you find that they are just enamored with this message that they never heard. You have the highest number of converts in places where you have very little. Unfortunately, we're the enlightened ones. We're invincible. We got all kinds of care. That's all you have to do is just go down to the local hospital and you're all set. Unfortunately, this has led to the decline of religion, because why do you need them? You know, why even bother? And this is the kind of community there's much less interdependence. We go to church, we take part in activities, and it isn't the same kind of interdependence. You're not going to go to Mary Jo to get your baked items unless she owns a bakery, and most often there aren't any that I know of in the church I'm in at St. Agnes. So you get all these other things that are no longer encouraging participation, and that is part of the problem we have today, is that we don't have room for God. But you think that, you know, it's not expensive. It's very expensive. It's very expensive, from teen pregnancy to welfare to all kinds of things. Love, which is missing in many families. You have single mothers, they do the best they can, but it's very difficult, even two-parent families. So we have these conditions that are occurring, and what we'll do, and I'll do, is discuss them in one or two detailed examples, which is really worked against us, and that's why there's a decline. People do not see the church as they did in the days of Christ. The church was the center of their lives. They got help, maybe almsgiving by the church. All of these things were very important. What's happened in the last 60 years, well, of course, it's probably my lifetime, is, I feel, the greatest change probably in any other period in our lives, really, in terms of the level of government that is intruding and reducing our freedom. You cannot have government involved increasingly and expect not to lose your freedom. Just like Obamacare is a good example, 17% of our entire economy which is approximately about 1.6 trillion. That's our budget. 17% of that is now going to this great big program called Obamacare. It's the largest amount, I don't know how many decades, including Bush. Bush is not free from this either with his Medicare prescription, drug prescription. More and more of that. And so this is not leading to lower cost government. It is increasing the cost of government. And you just have to look at some of the things that are happening in positions in the government where they feel they're empowered over you. Example, financial crisis. I took a 25% cut along with all my employees because we didn't want to lay off anybody. Guess what a cut is for Mr. Deval Patrick? Deval cut the legislators $300, and they're making anywhere between $75,000 and $100,000. That's a cut. You see the mentality? They are empowered over you. They got power over you. Deval, let's compare him to Romney. Romney got no money from the state for his position. He simply did not take a salary. Deval, he's a millionaire. Did he make any statement about giving up any of his money? He took it away from the legislators. He's another Messiah. Another Messiah. What we need is more people who have the hubris and arrogance. Once they get to that power position, they're above us. Deval Patrick didn't take any cut. Why should he, right? Of course, he's a leader. Why didn't he? And then his sidekick, Obama, same deal. Nothing. Nothing whatsoever. How about the federal employees? How much of a cut did they take? Even the state employees, how much did they take? Nothing. Tell me where I'm wrong. They took nothing. These are the people we pay and put them in their positions. Do you see what I mean? Both parties are at it together. They take turns. Any case, you see why I kind of raised my voice a bit over and over again? Last 60 years, I feel that we've had one of the greatest periods of change from more community-oriented families and churches to less.
About 5 minutes, John.
Now, this has decreased the mutual interdependence we have within the community. You get so many factors, so many forces splitting up the community as we knew it. And you may say, well, what was written in the Bible is really old. It's timeless in many respects. There are a lot of principles. Some of the things, yes, you may have to alter, but that's a basic principle of community. Christian community, Catholic community, those kinds of communities, all kinds of beliefs and activities are timeless. So, do I go and look for another document? Why? I have the best words ever. And Jesus did not do much, did not say much about government except that one statement. And that's a very important statement to make. And how we interpret that today, I'm not saying we should just forget about doctors and all that. I'm just talking about comparing what it was and using that, and as biblical times, as a kind of standard as interpreting what we do for it today. It was Jesus' advice. So some of the questions we talk about, how did we stray from Jesus' advice? We'll discuss how the state and federal government contributed to this decline. And lastly, for the last several weeks, I've tried to get someone to come in to sit down here. It wasn't Mrs. X. She's given up, I guess. She called in once and that's it. But, I keep her prominent here. Maybe she'll call someday. I had another gentleman here who was on my program for about 3 times, more than anybody else. And I found out through just the time period we had interactions. It wasn't I that had interaction with him specifically, but I always had a guest. And I tried to get him to come in to talk about this, because I know his leaning was liberal. You know, I'm a conservative, but I'm not sure this has got any kind of meaning to whether it's liberal or not. But, you know, when you're talking about the government, he's pro-government. I'm for effective government. I want an effective government. That's the most we can get, if we ever can get that. If we can even stop the government from growing, we're doing well. I'm not looking back to eliminate the education department or this or that. He didn't want to come. So I told him, look, we're not going to have another program unless we do this. So I'm going to give him a copy of this program and listen, because this show is for you. It is for you, because I'd like you to be part of this program to challenge me on what I'm saying. So as usual, when I have a discussion with people, what I do, I tell them, look, we'll sit down and discuss what I'm going to talk about and what you talk about. So here's a clear-cut way I operate. I don't believe in trick questions and things like that that a person hasn't had a thought or hasn't thought about. I believe and I feel, and I've always done this since I began the show, this is not just about me just projecting this, but simply a way of getting people to understand so they can discuss it.
You have 3 minutes, John.
So they can discuss it. They can discuss this, and I give them all the information. So I believe, you know, I gave up on debates. I don't even use the word debate, because it just kind of discourages people. So I've decided discussion is the right word, and it's an honest discussion of exchange of viewpoints. I'm not here to listen to someone else who agrees with me. Oh, it's nice to have those people. In fact, they can call on the phone and say hello. In any case, I'm hoping that he will come. And of course, any of you are welcome to call. Come on in. I know I spent a lot of time before the camera at the school committee, so I got practiced at it. It's far different than when I was in college or in high school.
3 minutes.
So I hope that you'll come, because communities are very important. Communities make up the town. We are a community in a sort of way. A much larger community, about 23,000 people, of course. Maybe 24,000. We're growing again. We're densifying this town. We call it smart growth. Really, it's stupid growth. You're just simply using a word, smart growth, just to call the same thing. You're just going to just densify the number of houses, number of people per square foot in this town. And let's call it for what it is. It is not smart growth. It's a way of increasing traffic and more traffic. There's plenty of places to go besides Reading. In any case, I'm hoping that somebody will come, challenge on this. I say that we're far from where Jesus originally gave us that information and direction. And I'm trying to let you know that there are reasons for this, but let's look at what your position is. If you're a Christian, the Bible is the basis for your beliefs and understanding. And we are to look at those words carefully. Those are the only words that we have from our Creator. You can say what you want about the book and all that, but still, it is the only work that we have. Inspired word, disciples, writers wrote it, but they were inspired. Because why would a creator try to dupe his own creation? It's contradictory for a person. God loves us. And so, anyway, try it. And I'll be looking for other programs. And thank you very much for listening. I look forward to the next one. It's always a pleasure.